Sahana vavatu, sahanao bhunaktu, sahaviryan karavavahai, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishawahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Okay, so verse 35, chapter 1, it was stated that Arjuna was unwilling to fight no matter what. And he said that even if I get killed, then still I'm not going to participate because these are my loved ones and I, have a dear relationship with them. And I just cannot go through this. So Arjuna is a very tough client. And so in this sense, Krishna has to get him out of this stuckness, out of this state of being stuck. And it's not an easy job. It is something that you have to be very tactful. You have to be smart. You have to account the person's needs. You have to look at where they're coming from. You also have to look at the whole situation at large. And even if the client seems to be very well informed and persuasive, you still have to have the ability to look one step ahead of where they're coming from. And this is the glory of Krishna. He's always one step ahead, slightly elevated above one's usual way of seeing and thinking. And so this is what we are privileged as students to look at where Arjuna is, because Arjuna is like you and I, thinking to the best of our ability. But Krishna is just slightly a little bit ahead. And so we're interested in what will Krishna say to Arjuna to get him out of his state of stuckness. And in then verse 36, Arjuna mentioned an important idea in the Vedas, which was how, right, cause and effect relationships happen in your life. So how is it that you receive something that is not entirely expected, or it's just random, and it totally sometimes throws you off? It's not something that you would have, thought would come. It just comes out of nowhere. Everything's okay, and then suddenly there's an event that just comes out of nowhere. And then you're kind of wondering, why? What happened here? I can't trace the causes and the effects here. I mean, I know the effect, it's definitely here, but what is the cause? What has led up to this? What has led to this particular contract, to this discussion, to this argument, to this particular uncomfortable situation? So you have to be very intelligent. And the thing is, you don't always have all of the information available to you. So even if you do your best, still you have to account that you will never quite know everything at once. So this means that there's also a time factor. You need to give yourself some time so that more information can come into your life and you can make the right informed decision. Now, what is very interesting is this papam and punyam was brought last week, and I want to bring a little bit more context to it so that we can relate to see the intricacies of this network. So it's a very nice story, and the story goes that there were two boys, and the story wants to show you the complication, or not the complication, but the intricate network of punya papam, how we tend to look at it in a linear way. It's like, I've done this, and therefore I should receive something pleasant in my life. And that's how it goes. But life isn't like that. It's not so linear. So the story wants to show you how it's not linear. So there were two boys, and they were about 11 or 12. So they didn't have much knowledge. They had just basic play knowledge and, knowledge of going to parties and so on. So after one party, actually it was a movie, then they went to a party, but they were coming back, and it was a daytime, and they were going past the temple. And one of the boys said, he turned his head to the temple and said, I want to go in and do my little prayer. I want to pay honor to the Lord. And the other boy was an atheist. And so he said to him, why do you want to go in there? There is no God. Where is he? Show me where is God. This is all just balloony. If all we had to do was just pray and we got on what we wanted, then there will be no suffering in this world. But there's a lot of suffering in this world, and so prayer clearly doesn't work, and people get sick and they pray for each other and they don't get well, and therefore, this doesn't work. And the other boy almost got convinced because he's 11 or 12 years old. You don't have a lot of knowledge to argue. But still, because it's a cultural thing, he went inside the temple and he did his little prayers to the Lord. Now, as he got out of the temple, he slipped on the stairs because there were stairs going down to the ground, and he hurt his ankle. And he felt bad about this. But the other boy was slightly ahead. He was already going towards where they were originally going. And the other boy found a golden coin on the ground, and he was exhilarated. He thought, I found a golden coin. This is amazing. I'm so lucky. And as the boy behind caught up to him, limping because he hurt his knee and his ankle, the other boy teased him and he says, look at that. Look, you went inside the temple, you did a little prayer to the Lord, and I did nothing. I just kept on walking and I found a golden coin and you fell down. You see, I told you there's no God. You're just wasting your time, and you move on with this. This is just all nonsense. The other boy was almost convinced that this is true and almost converted. However, there was a sadhu who happened to be begging for alms in the proximity, and he overheard the conversation, and he called the two boys over, and he was a little bit clairvoyant, so he could see a larger picture. And he said to both of the boys, I've overheard what you said, but actually the little boy, because he went to the temple and he prayed, what he got was only a minor fall, not a major accident. And you, because you carried on with your sense of conceit and you found a golden coin, you were destined to find treasure, and you only found a golden coin. So in the modern world, it would be more like, you were destined to approach an amazing opportunity that would have opened up many doors to you, but you only found a very small opportunity. And in reference to your life, you think, oh, you're so lucky. So like this, the two boys thought, wow, we never thought about it like this, because we look at it like I get a prayer and I'm supposed to get something. But still, the boy who fell down did not break his leg, did not go to the hospital. It was just a minor injury, whereas the other was destined for a huge treasure and he didn't get anything. So like this, the story wants to show you three things. Firstly, it is not linear. It is not a sense of, I pray and I get this. And if I don't get this, therefore the prayer doesn't work. There is as we said, a adrishtampalam. It is delayed between the time I pray, between the time I contribute to the world, and by the time the world gives me something back. That can have a huge or a long delay. Who knows? Maybe the boy who prayed was even a prayerful, dharmic, good person in a past life, and this contributed to his little fall. You don't know. But the story wants to show you that the efficacy of prayer is there. There is a intricate network that you and I cannot trace, because as much as the mind can do is just look at things in a linear fashion, but it is never like that. It is never linear fashion. The reason why the mind likes to look at it as this happened, therefore this is what's happening, is because the mind wants to simplify things. And it simplifies it for its own sake, because it's painful to not understand. So I would rather understand something in a very primitive way, in a very short-sighted way, than to admit that I am not able to understand at all. So in other words, the person has to ask themselves, what do I want? Do I want a short-sighted vision in life and feel comfortable about that? Or do I want to maybe feel a little bit of discomfort and acknowledge I don't quite understand how things work, because the network is highly intricate. However, I'm willing to take the time to understand. And this may not be comfortable, because you have to be vulnerable. You have to expose yourself and say that, hey, I do not know. And, therefore I want to ask. Now, to ask, you have to show your face to the world that this wise persona that we put is not so wise at all, because you have limited knowledge. I have limited knowledge. Everyone has limited knowledge. This is a fact. Even a wise person who's liberated, you think they know everything? Go ask them, go to the airplane cockpit and fly that Jumbo 747. Oh, they say, I know everything. Okay, so then why don't you communicate to me? Why using a translator to communicate to me in English? Why don't you speak in English if you know everything? You see, so even a wise, liberated person doesn't know everything. So this is something that we all have to come to terms with, that because not all information is available to you, you're not able to make the right decisions every single time. Someone asked me last week, how do I know if I'm making the right decision? And the answer is, go back. Firstly, acknowledge a right decision implies that you have all of the ascertained values. You've got all of the variables available to you in this moment, in the past, in the present, and in the future. But this is never the case. In fact, the decision that you make now may seem like the best decision, but tomorrow, when you get more data about the situation, it may not necessarily be the best then. So this is something that we have to acknowledge. Otherwise, the person will be constantly hard on themselves for not making the right decisions. So rather than asking, how do I make the right decisions? There's a slight twist to the question. With what intention am I asking or doing this decision? What is my intention behind this action? And if it were to be a general template, as I explained, it is my intentions are the best for myself and the other. That's all. When I make a decision, what are my intentions? Is it to hurt? Is it to lie? Is it to what? Or is it to simply bring light to the matter, throw light onto the things, reveal something that is not there or hasn't been revealed before? I want to throw light onto the matter. What are my needs? What are your needs? For example, what is the intention behind my action? Is it to, is it to bring things in order, establish some boundaries, but not for the sake of just you? You're also including the well-being of the other. So this includes some communication as to what is your intention when you make a certain decision or when you say something. So as long as your intention is keeping with, as I said, samanya dharma, that means it is in your interest for the well-being of the other and the well-being of yourself. As long as the intention is keeping to the absolute best, then you have something to work with. There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to feel guilty about. You simply state, hey, I was simply coming from the best intentions, and I didn't have all of the information available to me at that time. And by me communicating my intentions, it seemed like that I thought I figured it out, but it seems like I didn't quite include all of the possible information. So now we can continue from this new standpoint and work things out. So it's like this. Okay. And there's another story of Punya Papam. I like this story. It's a very short one. And I don't know who said it, but it's a funny one, I thought, initially. So it again wants to show you the non-linearity of, right, being a good person, therefore deserving a better life. Because this is how we expect it, right? I'm a good person, therefore my life should be perfect. Which is true, but not in a way that you think. And this story shows you. So there was a very dharmic person, right? He's doing all of the right actions. She's doing all of the right actions. They're educated in the Vedas. Their intentions are best for everyone, always accounting your needs, my needs, always, on top of their game, sharp, not willing to hurt, kind, gentle, namaste, goodbye. It's all there. The culture is there. And, this person dies one day. And so this person is now in heaven and he's having a great time. And he's like looking around and he sees someone very familiar and it's his neighbor. And he goes, hey, what's my neighbor doing in heaven? My neighbor was my neighbor, but this guy was like the most reckless driver I've ever seen in my entire life when we were neighbors down on earth. Now, and he gets a bigger house than me? This is nonsense, right? I don't get it. And one of the locals overhears the conversation and says, yeah, I understand that. But you see, friend, you did all of the right actions. This is no doubt. You're in heaven. This is a good thing. You know, you're enjoying yourself now. But what you don't know about your neighbor is that because he was such a reckless driver, a taxi driver, whoever got into his taxi started praying. And he converted them into the Lord's devotees and had a huge impact on every one of them. When they got out, they said, oh, you know, God help me, you know, please keep me safe. And that started a whole new trajectory for these individuals who got into the taxi. So again, you may think, oh, being a good person, you know, I'm supposed to have an enjoyable life and smiles. And this person, you know, they're getting away with it, but you actually don't know how intricate the network is, how complex it is to make it so that even they end up in the same place as you have. So what meets the eye is how it should be, but how it actually is usually different than how we thought it is or how it's supposed to be. Therefore, we have to give us some patience, some leeway, some space to understand the intricate network of cause and effect, dharma and adharma. And it's something that no one can truly understand. We can only do the best that you can with the information that you are provided. And then, you know, obviously, if something doesn't work out, then you can then, you know, change your course and then continue your discussion, you know, to bring things at peace, to bring things, throw light onto things. Okay. So this is now in verse 37, this is still a summary. Then Arjuna says, my concern is not necessarily to be kind. It's not that I don't want to kill them because I'm being kind to them, even though it's part of it. But Arjuna very clearly and explicitly states it is because there are papam consequences onto myself. And I'm worried about the future me, who I will have to step into in the future. And who's going to be suffering? I may not suffer right now, but where will I be in the future? In that body who will be under a high amount of distress as a result of having done something right now. So it seems to be very easy to get away with it, but the way that the system is set up, it's just the way it is. The way that it's set up, the moment you step on someone's toes or do something, no matter how little, there's a compensation system. And that compensation system puts you, the same person now, into the future, and you are going to have to go forward straight into that body. And when you go into that body, whatever that body is going to feel as a result of the action done in the present, you will feel that because you will be in that body, not someone else. It's not like Ishvara just takes a random person and puts them into the future you. You will be put in the future you. So this is how the compensation system works. Therefore, it is in your interest, and this is what Arjuna understands, it is in your interest to, right, uphold a certain ethical standard in your life, a certain standard of being careful to minimize the amount of damage. And if you do something that is, right, not entirely keeping with, you know, it's something that's negligent, as we said. If it's negligent, sure, there's always a chance to repair. There's always a chance to optimize. There's always a chance to, for a second chance. And this is to be also taken into account. So it's never too late. It's not like, oh, I've done something bad and I made a mistake 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and I lost a big deal. And now I'm carrying all of that guilt. You have to let it go because sometimes we just, right, identify with a role of the past and we don't allow ourselves to move forward into the future. So this is something to be looked into. You have to let go of the person who was there 5 years ago, who was there 10 years ago. Who here, look at this, who here was a saint from the day you were born to the day of today? Like a saint from day one. Right? Everything's done perfectly, not stepping on one single toe, saying the right words, making every right deal, saying the right things to your kids, to your manager, to your friends, to your spouses, not one person. So this means no matter what mistake you and I have made, no matter what mistake you have made, you need to let that go. Because this is a new person right here, right now. And this new person deserves new opportunities. As long as I'm holding on to the old person, I'm not letting this person walk through new doors of opportunities. So this means I have to recognize what is it that I'm still holding on to from the past, which I don't feel proud of, that is holding me back. What is it? Okay, so I can understand. At that time, I didn't have all of the information. You didn't have all of the information. You only did what you could at that time. But it doesn't mean that you are now bound to the mistakes of that person. Because in reality, there is no connection between this person now and the person of 5 years ago. Your body has changed over millions of times, and there is no connection between the mind of the 5 year ago person and the mind of this person. The only reason why you think you now are this person of that is because of your memory, of your chittam in your mind. If you took away your memory, you will not know who you are. You will always experience yourself as a new person. There's an amazing video on YouTube called The 7-Second Memory Man. And this man was a singer, and he married. And one time he had a headache, and he let this headache just pass by. And it passed by for a few days. But what happened was somehow the disease, that disease that he had, penetrated the brain, and he started to eat the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory. And it ate up the hippocampus. And this man one day, just like that, couldn't remember and find his home back. He couldn't find his home back from that day. He was at work and he couldn't find his way back to his house. So he had to go to the police for them to help him out. And the disease just continued eating the hippocampus away until eventually he couldn't remember that he was here only 2 seconds ago. Imagine this. Right now, this person is here. 1, 2, and I forgot that that person was here. This is because of your memory system. And what he was doing is he was writing down on a piece of paper, right now I am conscious. No. Right now I am conscious. No, right now I am conscious. So he's trying to make himself remain as a stable being in this moment, but he's unable to because the memory is not there. You can't function like that. If you think about your brain, billions of connections with veins and with arteries thinner than a strand of hair, millions of them you're depending upon for your memory to work right now. Just one of them breaks, a brain hemorrhage. You forgot everything. Whole life depends on billions of connections in your brain right now. And I am this person, I've got a memory, I've got a past, and all of that is supported by a vast network of billions and billions of tiny veins, tiny arteries that are one thing goes wrong, it's over. Your life is gone. You forgot everything like that. And this I'm holding on to. So in other words, we need to let go of whatever happened in the past and just have a little bit of compassion for the person in the present and say, okay, the person right now deserves to walk through new doors of opportunities, because the way that the system is made is it offers you possibilities. And if I park myself in some identity of the past, then I'm denying all of these possibilities that are right in front of me. Possibilities is what you are given as a human being. How many of those possibilities do you collapse? It is entirely up to you. Whether you want to collapse them or not, it's entirely up to you. The highest possibility that you can collapse is moksha or liberation, of course. But to collapse that, you also need to be a relatively free human being. So it's not just like, oh, let's get into chapter 1 and, or chapter 2. Chapter 1 sets the context up to show you there is a relative human being who needs to be looked at first, who needs to be taken care of, who needs some compassion onto oneself, because you're working hard. You've given this instrument, it's working for years and years and years, and one's just so hard on themselves. Oh, I should be doing better. When am I going to get it? I'm impatient. I want moksha right now. I want these things to happen. So impatient. And yet nothing in this world works like that. The flower takes seasons to bloom and show its beauty. Until then, if you touch it, it just breaks. You have to wait. That's how the system is made. You have to wait for things to take certain connections, certain configurations, and that requires some patience. So this is why chapter 1 is a beautiful summary and setup for the whole chapter 2 and onwards. And then in verse 38 and 39, Arjuna, he demonstrates his exalted thinking. And what is exalted thinking? He says that even though Duryodhana and the Kauravas are primarily living for the sake of greed and the sake of power and for the sake of showing their authority, I choose not to, because I choose to stick to what is really, really important and what really counts. So Arjuna knows, what is it that really counts in my life? Is it power? Is it to be seen? Is it to to be somebody? Is it to show how powerful I am? Or is it those values, those basic values of your connection to Ishvara, of your connection to yourself, of seeing the divinity in the world? What really, really counts? Arjuna knows this much. And by knowing this much, he's able to make a wise decision and say, I choose not to go with the trend. I choose not to go with how the world is going, because it's so easy to get pulled along the new trend. And then you say, no, this is how things have always been. The culture is just advancing, but actually things are starting to wilt away, losing their essence, losing their divinity, and it becomes normalized. And Arjuna says, I'm not going to normalize to the pop culture. I'm going to stick to the scriptural values because I was taught in the Gurukulam, and I'm going to abide by that because it is sanatana, it is beginningless. Whereas everything else will go out of and in fashion, out of fashion, in fashion. What are some examples of this? What do we have? 1980s. Multitask, do many things at once. And then something happened, I don't know what year, but then suddenly mindfulness came into practice. And suddenly it's no longer about doing many things. Now it's just do one thing, put all your effort into one thing. And then when mindfulness goes away, then it's all about just offload it to AI. Now I tell you, I guarantee you, when people get enough of AI, it will be something else. They'll start to ask for something else. And then the new trend will take over. So in other words, the trends come and go, come and go, come and go. But Arjuna is connected to something much deeper than trends that are coming and going. And that which is eternal, that which is sustaining you, sustaining me, sustaining everyone. That is what really counts to Arjuna. Therefore, he's not being tempted by the general trend. Even if someone's close to him and they're going one way, he says, no, I stay as myself. You do what you do, but I know what is precious. I know what really counts, and nothing can shake me off that. So Arjuna knows this much. Okay. So this is the summary, and we can now move on to the next verse. Okay, so verse 40. Kulakshaye pranashyanti kula dharma sanatanaha dharme nashte kulam kritsnam adharmo bhi bhavatyuta. So here Arjuna continues to look at a larger picture. And for him, the larger picture is not only his own well-being and the Kauravas, because he firstly acknowledged the Kauravas, right? They're my people. He's also concerned about his own well-being, and he brings the third addition. He's now also thinking about those who he is not directly connected to. In other words, he considers the overall destruction that this war will incur upon the society. And he says, suppose I win the war, and what will happen then? So he's asking this question, what will happen after this happens? And he says, well, a lot of men will be, right, dead. And what's going to remain? Widows and orphans, right? And children, and they will be without fathers. And all of these men, they carry important traditions. They carry important culture. And this culture will be lost because in real life, right, you didn't have time to journal all of your thoughts. You didn't have time to tell your children to speak out what you know. And then suddenly you are, right, you're escorted, or you're told to inscripted into the army. And so all of that knowledge will be gone away in this war. And Arjuna is concerned about this. Therefore, how will the knowledge, right, trickle down into the system? It cannot. And therefore, Arjuna says, it will take many generations for the society to come back. So this is a sophisticated mind. He's not only thinking about his people, he's thinking about people he's not directly connected to. It takes a certain conscience in you to be concerned about those who you're not directly connected to. But it's a natural expression of a healthy mind. That's what the verse wants to show. So he says, if families are dysfunctional, what's going to happen? Well, then the whole society will become dysfunctional. Why? Because a society is made of families. If a family is dysfunctional, therefore it trickles down into the larger community. The community trickles down into the entire society. So this is his understanding. So if you take, for example, the current war in the Middle East, it doesn't matter there's no question of who's right or wrong. This is not what we're talking about. The question is both sides will pay the price. Both sides are paying the price right now. And even if one side is not paying the price now, they will take a reputation hit much later. And the children of that country will suffer many generations from now. Why? Because this is happening right now. So this is what Arjuna is concerned about, that there are families and there are good people and they are all on the receiving end of this war. Therefore, now Arjuna in verse 42 justifies how a broken society turns to adharma. What larger picture does Arjuna consider when thinking about the consequences of the war?
There's going to be sins that will be paid by, his people. There's going to be consequences. Maybe it might not be directly to him, but there'll be sins that will be left for the people that are alive after all of this.
They will have to take the consequences, they'll have to bear the burden of what the war has produced. So good. Leela.
Suffering, well, it's a consequences of his choices. If he's going to proceed forward, the next generation, as you mentioned before, might suffer because of his actions.
I think general loss of culture.
And children won't have role models.
Ah, excellent. So children won't have role models, and these men who are on the war, they won't be able to come back to their children and say, what went on and what they learned and what they saw, and therefore they won't be able to inculcate that humility in their children.
Lots of negative attitude, like vengeance, anger, plundering, committing crimes.
Yeah, this is
because they're suffering.
Yeah, this is a good point. So if the father is not there, then there will be a lesser chance for inculcating these values in the children. And I think the verse also says the woman will turn to adharma. So in other words, the woman becomes susceptible to other mixing and polluting and mixing in. And so there's no man to sort of to guide her a little bit rationally, and so this can also happen.
I think the key point here is vengeance, because once it started, there is no stopping to it. I'll take revenge of what happened to my family, then with whom I have taken the revenge, then his or her term will come, and then that person will take revenge, and then there is no.
Yeah. In other words, it starts a cycle of vengeance, and there's no and then emotions are high, and then there's no man to stop it. And so it's just now you're caught up in a whole cycle of back and forth. So you can see how many consequences something so seemingly on one side, it has consequences on the other side. So this is how the world, as I said initially, is connected through this network. And you just can't trace it because it happened such a long time ago.
Right. And if you look from citizens' perspective, all the citizens, they will say, the king, he's the king who has actually killed their loved ones, right? So how will they actually love the king who has ruled the dead bodies of their loved ones?
Yeah, it's amazing. So it's almost like we need a figure to put our project our hatred on, or our dissatisfaction on, and so the king has to also take the all of the hatred and projection, because who do you go to? Who do I blame? I have to blame someone. This is just human behavior. This is why the presidents can take so much criticisms, or political leaders can take so much criticisms, even though they have nothing to do with it. They're just doing to the best they can for the society, but they also have to be the figure upon which we can, say, no, it's someone's fault here. Someone's responsible. Yeah.
Yeah, Andre, can I ask a question? Just sort of going back to a couple classes ago, I think you mentioned about ahimsa, nonviolence, and is that part of Samanya Dharma, I think, like the overall well-being. Do you think that could be something that's in his mind maybe at this point, or no? Like, I know he ends up fighting the war eventually, so I guess I'm just trying to understand how that ahimsa and like overall non-violence sort of reconciles with actually fighting the war.
So ahimsa, so see, the thing is, Sharmali, Arjuna is not entirely sure what is the right course of action. So he doesn't know whether this is himsa, or injury to the larger cause, or whether this is a cause for the greater good. So he's having a confusion in this moment. And he wants to make the best informed decision, because like any human being, you get born with this program of what is the right thing to do. You don't learn about, not having to cut yourself when you're born as a baby. I want to not hurt myself, and I also want to protect or generally not hurt another human being. So this program is built in all of us, and this program we call dharma. Now, this program gets distorted as we grow along, because we see some person, for example, the daddy is shouting at the mommy, and therefore, if daddy loves the mommy, then loving means shouting. Loving means dominating. So the association gets created like that, and therefore, even though I want to be a dharmic person, a good person, I end up actually doing something that is opposing what dharma really means. And it's innocent. So it's not like, for example, Duryodhana now, is doing all of this intentionally. He even says in one of the verses that I know what is the right thing to be done, but I can't get myself to do it. So something in me is holding me back from doing the right thing, because there are so much conditionings that are causing me to go against my inner program, which is telling me this is damaging, this is hurtful for you, and this is hurtful for the other person. So Arjuna wants to figure out what is the course of action that will serve everyone for the greater good, and whatever that is what he wants to ask Krishna. Now, Krishna hasn't spoken yet, so we don't quite know what Krishna is going to say. So your question will only be answered in verse 2 of chapter 2.
Okay, thank you.
I get so teaser. All right, verse 42. Verse 42, he justifies how the broken society will turn to adharma. Sankaro narakayaiva kulagnanam kulasyacha patanti pitaro hyesham lupta pindo dakakriyaha. The Vedic Dharma says your existence here is not isolated. Whatever you do, because you're connected to other people in your life, and they're connected to others. So whatever you do will pass on to all of these other people. So like this, because everyone in the war is connected to somebody else, when they get scarred or when they get hurt, then that will ultimately influence the generations to come. So for example, there was in, World War II, right? After, Germany was, after the war ended. What happened was, for several generations, a lot of Germans felt guilty because they felt like our country was part of the greater destructive cause. So generations after the war ended suffered. And one of the fellows who was there was Rajneesh, who was Osho, another name. And most of the people who came to him, 60% were Germans. And the reason is because most were trying to relieve themselves from the guilt of what their country has done. Because Rajneesh offered a common slogan, and that is, I'm here to give you freedom. And they all couldn't resist a sense of freedom freedom from guilt. So in other words, the whole generation suffered or carried this burden, and they still do nowadays, some of them, of having what their generation did. So it shows you how a further generation gets influenced and their decisions get guided by what has happened before. When India was under British colony, even nowadays, most of India is very different than if it was some other way. We don't know how it would have worked out, but it has certainly worked out how it is today. Suppose India was never colonized by the British. What would India look like today? We don't know, but it will look different. That's a fact. So we can't quite categorically say it will be better or it will be worse. Maybe new infrastructure was added, maybe new technologies were added, we don't know. But either way, there are some Indians who still carry, right, that identity of how our India was colonized. And so today, they're still burdening themselves with that thought. So in other words, what it wants to show you is you have to release yourself from what has happened in the past, because it has never not been happening. It's always going to continue happening. And many more things will continue to happen that you and I can't even conceive of. Long after you and I are gone, there will be many generations, many more wars that will happen that are, and you will say, how can this happen with all of the internet technology and, clarity and the availability of information, and yet still conflicts ensue. This is the nature of the world, which is in primarily a dualistic state. For every peace, there is a counterpart, hatred. For every hatred, there is a love. For every resolution, there is a problem. For every problem, there is a solution. And this is the interaction of the world. It always goes through this dualistic state, and it's never going to end. This is just the nature of the universe. So this is why Vedanta comes in and says, if you want to participate in this, okay, this is lovely. Here, we'll give you some food and participate it. But if you want to get out of it once and for all, then you have to pursue something else. You have to pursue moksha. So eventually, Arjuna, as we will see, will come to this realization and he will say, okay, I've done all I could, and I just want to, what is other than all of this than just fighting and, and colonizing and doing good? What is more than this? Is it just to do all of this, or is there more to this? So this we will see. Therefore, Arjuna says the negative impact or the negative impressions will pass on, and I, Arjuna, will be the cause of all of that. And I cannot bear that kind of consequences. For that reason, he continues into the next verse, and he reiterates the same idea, verse 43. Doshaire taih kula gnanam varna sankara karakaihi utsadyante jati dharmaha kula dharmashcha shashvataha. So Arjuna now says, I see overall dysfunction in the society, and that will take generations to repair, for whom I will be the cause, thereby incurring all of the papam. And where is all of my well-being? Where's my well-being in all of this? I don't get it, Krishna. I'm incurring damage onto myself. I'm killing my people. I am destroying the society. Therefore, he talks about all three of them, his own people on the Kaurava side, the overall society, and his own seen and unseen results. Now, what possibly can Krishna say that's even wiser than this? Think about this, because Arjuna is completely rational here. He's just stating the facts. This is how it is. What possibly can Krishna say that is even wiser to what Arjuna is saying?
Krishna is likely to talk about the overall good of the society, and in the overall good of the society, how the war fits in, and how the war will probably justify the destruction of the adharma and the success of dharma into the society.
Okay, good, Gautam. So Gautam is already thinking one step ahead. So he's saying that Krishna will possibly put the whole war at large into a grander picture and show how what is happening has happened for a reason, and there is no other way that it can go except to, right, lower the damage that the society will continue to, have if we keep the Kauravas just running around, doing whatever they want, claiming power, influencing other kingdoms, and therefore we have to put an end to this. This is one possibility. So this is excellent, Gautam. Anything else? What possibly could Krishna say to Arjuna that is even wiser to Arjuna's rational, and justifiable arguments to why he should not fight?
Do your duty. Don't worry about the results.
Okay. Okay, he will say, do your duty. However, Arjuna will throw an objection. I'm unable to do my duty because of my very extreme
Feelings.
Yeah, of my feelings. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, Krishna could say, so that is not good enough. It is a good suggestion, but it is not good enough for Arjuna. So this is what I want to point out. Yeah. So you're not wrong, all right? We're just kind of, seeing how can Krishna establish himself higher than Arjuna's standpoint so that Arjuna can be moved into action and thus do his duty.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, he might say that, today is the consequence of the past one.
Yeah.
So no matter what you do or what you don't do, whatever is bound to happen will happen. So you are just nimitta matra. I mean, you will explain more than better. That will come.
Sure. Absolutely. So what is bound to happen will happen. And, whether you want to fight or not, it's someone else is going to do the job anyway. So it might as well be you. In fact, Krishna will say this very soon. However, Arjuna will overpower his argument and do something else. And we will see this in chapter 2, I think.
Krishna might also tell Arjuna that whatever rationale he is giving is not correct, because it's not for the first time that Arjuna has fought any battle.
Right.
He has, fought many battles before and won many battles before. But why this rationale is coming only at this point in time, only in this battle?
Got it.
So it means the reason is something else, not just the war.
Very good, very good. So Meena is now again bringing the larger picture and the history of Arjuna's past fights. And he's saying all of those fights, you have done your duty, as Arsha says. And now in this particular battle, that is, you're not being a Kshatriya, you're not doing your part. And therefore, it cannot be what you're explaining. It has to be something deeper. And we have to look at that. What is that deeper cause for which you're not willing to fight, Arjuna? Well, let's look at the deeper underlining unspoken resistance that you are carrying but unable to articulate because you're under the intoxication of emotional alcohol, should we say. Okay, that's how it is. Yeah, so when one person is intoxicated, it's like being drunk, you're unable to think. It's like that. That's why he's going to collapse soon. In fact, he's going to collapse very soon and say, I'm weak. I'm unable to do anything.
Yeah, as you said in the previous classes, confirmation bias. In this battle, he just took the decision that he's not going to fight. And then he's giving the reasons why he should not fight because of confirmation bias for his own decision.
Okay. So in other words, he wants to preserve the status quo of his original decision. And now he's coming up with reasons why what he's chosen initially, that little point of decision, he wants to find reasons out there and add more strength, add more authority to his initial decision, which was not well thought of, or was it? We'll see now.
Krishna could have said that you are just a pawn in the overall picture. Events will take place. Mahabharata will take place whether you fight or not fight. If you don't fight, somebody else will take over. So you better do your duty and you fight. Otherwise, war will still take place. Whatever has to happen will happen.
This will definitely, this is one thing that he can say, and he will say this. However, Arjuna is going to overpower that also. In chapter 2, we will see. Okay, but good. So Lorena?
I was just going to mention that he's also at a point in his life where he's got enough discernment
to see the larger consequences that we've just discussed. And this is playing deeply with him, probably more so than other battles that he's led up to this. Like he's got enough discernment to see the wider picture and the consequences of all what will happen. Whereas that's playing on his mind now more than ever.
Sure.
So he's the Adhikari now. He can actually see a bigger picture, and that's why he's seeing the mass consequence of what happens.
That could be a reason. So if I'm getting what you're saying is that Arjuna could be in a state of seeing a larger cause, a larger picture, and because of his education, his new knowledge, his newfound knowledge, he's unable to follow through because there's a lot more consequences that he sees now as compared to the battle after the 13th year when Virata wanted to be the kingdom, they wanted to attack the kingdom Virata. So now he's
or battles leading up where he was, the warrior, and then that was sort of accepted, those roles were accepted with his duty, but now he can see the bigger picture because he's got the discerning mind.
Right. And thereby and through that he's unable to act.
Well, he's finding it hard to act because he can see how much destruction it's going to cause on a wide scale.
Good. So this is exactly what Arjuna is going through. However, Krishna is going to point something else, that reason that you're saying is not the bigger picture. There's a much bigger picture to that. So we will see what that is. So that's exactly what Arjuna is actually thinking, but Krishna is going to step it up a little bit. So verse 44, same idea. Arjuna is going to reiterate the consequences. Utsana kula dharmanam manushyanam janardana narake niyatam vasaha bhavati tyanushruma. Whoever creates disturbance in a society, right, there is some unpleasantness that will come to that person. This is common sense. And what he really wants to bring out is that, or what the verse is bringing out is archetypes. There are two kinds of archetypes, big major archetypes in the book. The first archetype is Arjuna. Arjuna is the type of person who always considers or accounts the well-being of him and the other, not only in the short term, but also the long term. Because it's very easy to say, this is good for you. Ice cream is good for you right now. Here, have an ice cream. You'll be happy. But actually, I should be thinking also about your overall, right, your cholesterol, are you diabetic, and do you want to kind of keep your body, thin or whatever it is, and how quickly do you gain that weight? I don't know. So I have to take that into account. So in that sense, I will give you something else. But if you want an ice cream, you can still have an ice cream. So Arjuna is a type of person who looks at the larger picture and not just kind of the narrow-minded, this is good for you, and thereby this is the kind of things that we have to do. He's able to look past the boundaries of that short-sighted thinking and go, okay, what else is there that I'm not accounting? And it's not something that you become. It's something that you learn through course of time. It's not something that you press a button and suddenly you're able to see. It's something that a person slowly, right, develops. It grows on you. The more you think, the more you're able to see the bigger picture. Initially, as kids, we all start like the second archetype, Duryodhana. What kind of archetype is he? He thinks about himself. He thinks about what is there to gain for myself. What will I enjoy? What's in it for me? There's no consideration of the other person's well-being. It's generally just me, myself, and I. Dominantly, it's not like the person is entirely ignorant of the other, but mostly it's about the individual's needs and individual's likes and dislikes, and doesn't think about the consequences of doing what is about to be done. And even if one does think about the consequences, then it's only short term. One needs to think about a long-term consequence. For example, in school, right? This is even today. Bullies. What is the whole bully situation about? Well, we could say that the bully, for the sake of suppose the bully is Duryodhana. What does the bully do? He generally, right, has some disagreement about the other boy or the other girl. But why? Are they thinking about the other person's life? Are they thinking about their well-being? Are they thinking about their suffering? Are they thinking about their contributions to this world? Most likely not. So in other words, the bully innocently can only see this much. Is unable to step outside that little vision of what is going to please me, and thereby we call him bully. In this case, we call him Duryodhana. So it's like this. So it's not like Duryodhana is trying to be evil. He's just the kind of person who cannot see a larger picture. And so it's a process. It's a process to start to develop a vision whereby you can see a little bit more than just now. So easy to buy into this whole now notion. Just be in the now. Oh, absolutely. What a good excuse. Just be in the now. Okay. Just, eat whatever I want. I'm being in the now. Enjoy whatever I want. I'm in the now. But now doesn't just include now. It includes now, much larger now. So even that has to expand for the person. And this is what the Gita will do for us. Question for verse 44 that I just explained. How does Duryodhana's attitude towards the war differ from Arjuna's attitude?
A simple, quick one. It's the, Duryodhana's is more self-centered around what he wants, what he desires, what he thinks is rightful ownership to. Whereas Arjuna is thinking of the others around him.
Okay.
Not about himself. And he feels guilty actually destroying others around him. And also blinded by his emotional attachment to others.
Okay, good.
So that's a simple, quick one.
No, it's lovely. In fact, we'll talk about guilt in the next verse. Very nice, Rani. Anything else?
Duryodhana is more like he is more selfish. He thinks of only himself, of his personal gains. He thinks that all the people are here to help him only so that he achieves what he wants. While Arjuna, he thinks about, he's more inclusive. He thinks about everyone, his future generations, the families of even the opposite army. After they have died, what will happen to their children, their wives, and the whole humanity itself. So he is more inclusive. He thinks of the world, not just himself. And he thinks about the well-being of everyone.
Very
So
nice. Very
not
nice.
just.
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
yes, very nice, Divya. So also someone says he's only concerned about winning. So Duryodhana is consumed by the single thought that he is the rightful owner of the kingdom. In other words, he's a black or white thinker. In other words, he's not able to see that his well-being actually needs other people too. For his well-being to be truly well, I also need the help of other people. Because as long as I'm creating enemies, then I have to bear the enemy in my mind. And where's the peace for that one if they're bearing all of these enemies? In that sense, Arjuna understands, as Divya says, he's inclusive because it's not just about winning, but about including others. Because if I exclude others, then I have to bear their suffering. I have to bear their hatred towards me. And that is not a pleasant experience for a king or a prince. Vijay?
Yeah, I also feel that there is a slight fear in Duryodhana's thinking about the war.
Fear.
Because, when you are caught up thinking about only yourself, then there is a fear that will be there in the mind. Arjuna, though, comes across initially, his thought process is about what happens to others. He's not thinking about himself. So the fear is not there, though some of them may interpret it as a fear. His bow is going out, but that's not fear. He's more concerned about others, which is causing him to feel what he felt. But Duryodhana, there is a fear. In his initial talk with Dronacharya as well as with Bhishma, there is a slight fear because he's feverish about winning it.
Yeah.
And that causes a fear.
I think it's a very good point. And also, as long as he also testified, Duryodhana, that he says, let me talk to Drona because he may turn any moment to the other side. So in that sense, he's fearful that people may change their minds because he's in touch with conscience that people prefer what is good rather than being on the wrong side. And secondly is that what Vijay has said is that when you are not so much caught up about you, but your concern is also for the others, it makes it a lot easier to work. For example, the first law in public speaking, or there's many laws, but one of the first laws is that if you really want to reduce that fear, then think about what can I contribute? How can I help other people share my perspective and deliver some value? If I make it about me, what will I say? What will they think of me? You know, can I do this? Can I speak? What if I stumble upon my words? What if I make a mistake? What if I mumble? All of this, every one of them just adds more fear, stifling the person down. Therefore, it's an excellent point. Rather, what can I contribute? So it's not about me. I just relinquish this person for a moment as a mere instrument, and I just move my lips, move my mouth, and I say what is to be said. And of course, you will get feedback. It may not be pleasant, but at least you will get feedback that will make you much better next time. And so one has to be sensitive and vulnerable enough to put themselves outwards so they can get some feedback from the world. In one time in Toastmasters, I was some years ago. Toastmasters is a worldwide institution where you want to learn to speak, and I always wanted to conquer this fear of speaking. Right, it was a big thing for all of us as kids. You know, we're just terrified, and there were buckets, like 3 buckets, and you have to basically go up. It's the scariest thing ever. You go up in front of the class, and there's about 20 of us, and there are 3 buckets. From the first bucket, it's a place. So any place, it could be under a rock, it could be in the house, it could be in the car. The second bucket is a piece of paper. It's an action. So for example, you know, rubbing or erasing or talking or walking. And the third bucket is an object. So it could be, you know, it could be a tree, or it could be a cup or anything. So basically you have these 3 pieces of paper, and you need to make a speech right on the spot for 2 minutes using these 3 pieces of information. And I thought it was just such a lovely, empowering exercise. And just the words that come out of you when you're under pressure, it's just the funniest thing ever. You know, you totally stuff it up sometimes. It's just spontaneously funny. You just totally go red and sweating. But the point is, through this, you learn that it's okay. You're not going to get shot by other people, and they're not going to hate you. In fact, they will, you know, they will think of, like, you've done it, you know, well done. So like this, I've gotten rid of my fear of speaking by exposing myself to the most fearful situations. So this is an excellent point on what Vijay is saying. There's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. So feel that fear, feel that pressure of, no, I don't want to, I'm going to fail, I'm going to lose this, I'm not going to make a good speech, people are not going to listen to me, I'm not going to put my point across. Exactly because of that, I will do it. And when you do it, you will be surprised how quickly the fear will come down. It's the fastest way to cure all fears about speaking, about you know, being afraid to do what is to be done. Now, next verse. So all of this thinking of Arjuna, it leads to 2 emotions, guilt and hurt. So let's see what verse 45 says. Aho bata mahat papam kartum yavastita vayam yadrajya sukalobhena hantum swajanam udyataha. So in verse 45, Arjuna's bubble starts to pop, and he starts to wonder, why has he not thought about all of this before? He held resentment for what the Kauravas did to Draupadi, for the disrobing. He didn't think about you know, the consequences of that all of this was leading up to. That it's starting to dawn upon him that this is a major deal, what's about to happen. And he's very surprised that, you know, his mind was preoccupied on what is different to how it is. So his mind was elsewhere and was imagining what the war is going to look like. But the war, the actuality of the situation is very different than Arjuna thought about it. So in this sense, he starts to, you know, regret, I have not stood up to my brother Yudhishthira. He just went along with it. He made all of these decisions, and I never kind of interrupted or intercepted. You know, I should have done my part. And so Arjuna's bubble starts to pop just like Dhritarashtra's, no different. In other words, he says, all of this, Krishna, all of this is ultimately leading me to hurt and guilt. I'm hurt about what has happened, how I was treated, what happened to Draupadi, what happened to my brothers, what happened to me in the forest, and I also feel guilty. Now, what is guilt? Well, guilt is in reference to something that you thought was done not right, not keeping with what is to be done. Guilt is in reference to your own commissions and omissions. In other words, you felt that you could have done something better, or you had the resources available, but didn't take full advantage of them. And when you did something, it caused a lot of hurt to the other individual. And you thought, oh my God, I never intended to do this. This is not the kind of person I am. And so it's in reference to something that you have done. Now, this is fine, as long as you're able to see it as an emotion, which is an indicator, a potential indicator, letting you know where you are in reference to your decisions, and then learn from it. Say, well, here's an indicator. What have I done? And what can I do better next time? If it's like that, then it's no issue. But if one keeps that guilt and just holds them back for having done something long time ago, then it become an extremely stifling emotion. It can hold you back from being, right, collapsing new opportunities, opening up new doors. So in a sense, guilt can be good because it makes you understand, it makes you think about what you've done. In that sense, it can be good. So anything, whether it's guilt, whether it's this, whether it's that, depending on how you look at it, it can be something that holds you back or something that from which you can learn and become a better human being. And now Duryodhana, he didn't have any guilt, or he could have had guilt, but also he may not have had any guilt at all because he was mostly consumed about his power and his gains and winning. So it's not always true that everyone feels guilt, because we say that, see, the program of guilt is inbuilt. If you do something wrong, you will feel guilty. But you also know the moments when you've done something wrong, there was no guilt whatsoever. This is because when one's own program, one's own notion of what is the right thing to do is so convincing that it totally overlaps, overshadows the program. So it doesn't feel like I've done anything wrong and anything wrong. In that sense, Duryodhana may not have had any guilt at all. We don't know. It's a possibility. And then when it comes to hurt, what is hurt? Hurt is in reference to what someone else has done to you. In other words, somebody else's commissions and omissions. In other words, they should have done something that your standards were not met. And they have done something to violate those standards. They haven't spoken to you in the right way. They haven't addressed you in the right way. They haven't said the right thing. But however, hurt can also have another layer onto it. Because suppose you come from a certain culture and someone communicates to you in a way that your culture is not compatible with, then you'll get hurt by that, even though the other person didn't intend to hurt you. You see this? So in other words, if you carry a certain way of how you expect to be treated, because that is how you are, right? You have this method of how you want to be treated, but someone doesn't quite match that standard, then that can end up hurting you. So you have to be careful, like, where is this coming from? Is it coming from my standards? Is it coming from, has this person really hurt me? Or I'm being hurt because of my own kind of standards of what needs to happen for me to feel like everything's okay. The point is, suppose that happens, there's nothing you can do about it because it happened, right? It happened, it's a fact. The only thing you can do then is to bring out, hey, here's what happened. I felt hurt when you said this, and here's what was triggered in me. And then the other person can communicate and they can say, no, I didn't intend to hurt you. That was not my intention. And through that, you can look at your own stuff and you can say, okay, so then where did this hurt arise from? Did it arise from my sense of pride? Did it arise from my sense of, sense of standards? And to what capacity am I willing to make those standards flexible so that this doesn't happen again? In other words, you have to look at where are your standards. Are your standards so high that it doesn't allow anyone just to kind of be a friend with you? Are your standards so tough, so strict, that it's very hard for an ordinary person to have a communication with you? So this means you also have to look at your own standards, and not only your own standards, but also you look at your own, where is the other person coming from? And therefore you can have a conversation about it, just to check up who's, what's going on here, because it's very hard to tell whether your standards were violated or the other person was coming from a less than informed or a negligent place. It's very hard to tell that. So you have to have a communication and come to a common resolution. So, right, you know what's going on. Okay. So hurt is also when you feel violated. Violation is when someone says, I felt violated. What do they mean? Like, I felt violated.
Someone who attacks or does not live up to my expectations.
Someone who challenges your values.
Level, maybe someone hurting your ego, probably.
Crossing our personal boundaries where you feel hurt.
When I feel hurt, someone's, right, either crossing the boundaries, that means they're not doing what is supposed to be done, or my own standards, my own cultural ideas of or how things are supposed to be are being compromised. Now, when it comes to violation, what it really means is that someone is disregarding all of your sufferings, all of your contributions, is disregarding your humanity, disregarding your basic right to exist, your basic right as a human being. So either way, you feel hurt. So Arjuna is feeling both guilty and hurt. Now, when someone feels hurt, how does hurt, if it's unaddressed, how does it flourish in life? It flourishes as victim mode. In other words, others have done this to me. Everyone's after me. They're trying to compromise my, identity. They're trying to, devalue me. They're, the former US president, right? I follow this, right? All about victim mode. Everyone's attacking me. I'm under attack. They're trying to discredit me, doing this. And how else does hurt end up coming out? It ends up as blame. You have to look for some face. You create an enemy. Some face has attacked me. I need to find someone in the real world and say it's their fault. Even though it's not their fault, you link it up and you say it's their fault. You find some connection, you say it's their fault. It's the institutions, it's the government, it's the opposing party, it's my parents, it's my brothers, it's my sisters. It is someone. It's my past teachers. It is someone. So in other words, as long as my hurt remains unaddressed, how would that come out? As both anger, passive aggressiveness, and looking to blame at someone. As long as these three, passive aggressiveness, looking to blame someone, and and just not feeling friendly at all, as long as these three remain, then you're gonna person's gonna have a hard life, a very hard life of feeling cheerful. Because the wise person, we say, is one who is cheerful. Now, how can you be cheerful if one's still holding on to their past hurt, right? Finding someone to blame. So this is why Vedanta first releases you from your personal ideas. In Sanskrit, we call this pratibhasika. Pratibhasika is that which is my own personal stuff that I'm carrying, past guilt, past shame, past hurt. I have to relatively neutralize it so that I can be available and see the reality as it is. Otherwise, how will I see the reality if I'm still overlapping the reality with my own stuff? You see this? How will I start to analyze the world and see that that all that is here is Ishvara? How will I see that if all that is here is my own stuff? It doesn't make sense. So I have to first look at my stuff, relatively reduce it, and only then I can start to see the world. And then by seeing the world, I can now start to inquire into the nature of the world. I can say the nature of the world is Ishvara and Brahman. And to come to that point, I have to be relatively clear from my own setbacks, from my own things that are holding me back. This is crucial. That's why Vedanta is not about skipping. This is not Neo-Vedanta. Go straight into Brahman. This is Advaita Vedanta, tradition, Adi Shankara, who first looks at your pratibhasika, personal ideas, personal pressures, personal hurts, personal shame, personal guilt, let's look into that like mature people, and then we will start to look at the reality. And that will then very smoothly take place. So as a result of all of this analysis of Arjuna, which has culminated into guilt and hurt, his final conclusion is he doesn't want to fight, and therefore, verse 46, he says, I'm not going to chant, it's very short. He says, verse 46, I'm going to give up all my weapons, Krishna. It's better than killing so many people. Arjuna physically collapses because he just made his final declaration. And then verse 47, Sanjaya will describe Arjuna's state to Dhritarashtra. Because remember, Dhritarashtra is still listening to whatever Sanjaya is reporting. So verse 47, Sanjaya uvacha evam uktva Arjuna sankhye radho pastha upavishate visarjya sasharam chapam shokasam vigna manasaha. Sanjaya says to Dhritarashtra that Arjuna's mind is mentally overwhelmed at this point. He has physically collapsed. His discomfort, his sorrow, his hurt, his guilt has manifested at the level of the physical body. His knees are weak and he physically drops on his seat and he doesn't want to fight. And therefore, this concludes chapter 1. And what is the order of chapter 1? The order goes like this. Firstly, Sanjaya tells Dhritarashtra that Duryodhana is talking to Drona and he's amping Drona up. He's saying, you know, these people are coming here for my sake, and there's the powerful Bhishma who is invincible, and we need to protect him. And then the scene 2 of chapter 1 turns to Arjuna, and then Arjuna tells Krishna, please take me to the middle of the field. And then Arjuna sees all of his close ones, and then he starts to, the reality starts to dawn upon him. And finally, the scene 3 is where Arjuna is telling how he's feeling. He's reporting his sorrow and his inability to fight. And then let's do a closing. Om Tat Sat Iti Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Tsu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama Pratamo Dhyayaha. Okay, so I'll just explain this last verse. So Shri Mad. So what is Shri Mad? It's a common word. Shri Mad means wealth. In other words, possessor of wealth. So who is Krishna? He's the possessor of wealth, of what? Of knowledge. Of knowledge that will set you free from this, right, eternal war that's going on, called the Mahabharata. And then it says Upanishatsu. So Shri Bhagavad Gita, and then Upanishatsu. Now, Bhagavad Gita means song of the Lord. So Bhagavat, Bhagavan, Lord, and then Gita, song. So song of the Lord. What kind of Lord? Shrimad, the Lord who is a possessor of wealth. And then Upanishatsu. So in other words, this text called Bhagavad Gita is equated to the Upanishads. What is the Upanishads? Well, in the Veda, they come from the Vedas. There's 4 Vedas. They're the text that is containing this knowledge. Veda has 2 sections, Karma Kanda, which is all about rituals and prayers and how to gain things in my life. And the second section is Jnana Kanda, or Upanishads. Upanishads is that knowledge which is there to set you free. It is knowledge which has the knowledge about the world, about you, about the cause, before time and space came, about consciousness. All of that knowledge is contained in the Upanishads. And therefore, the same knowledge that's taught in the Upanishads, the second section of the Vedas, is the exact same knowledge that is contained in the Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, if you go through the Bhagavad Gita, you're going through all of the Upanishads at the same time. So it's not like, oh, I haven't learned Brihadaranyaka, I haven't learned the Katha or Kena Upanishad. What about them? All of that stuff is already in the Bhagavad Gita. And then Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. So in other words, two subject matters are covered in the Bhagavad Gita. The first is Brahma Vidya. Brahma, that means Brahman, that means the final reality, and Vidya means knowledge. So, in other words, Brahma Vidya is a larger inquiry into the nature of reality. And what is this inquiry about? Specifically, you, the jiva, that means the individual, whoever you think you are, inquire into that, the jagat, the world, and Ishvara, the cause of the universe. So jiva, jagat, Ishvara, and finally Brahman. So 4 things in total. Not that they're things, but 4 realities to reconcile. If I just learn about Brahman, that's only 1/4 of reality. If I learn just about jiva, that's 1/4 of reality. If I learn about jiva and Ishvara, that's half of reality. If I learn about jiva and Brahman, that's still half of reality. To understand the whole reality, jiva, jagat, Ishvara, and Brahman. You have to know all 4 to reconcile the differences. Otherwise, I park myself in a subtle thought and I say, I got the final reality. It doesn't work like that. And we will see slowly why it's crucial to look at, to see the world as it truly is. I can't say I'm Brahman and then I can't explain the world. And yet you're surrounded by forms. Therefore, we have to reconcile all 4. And secondly, Yoga Shastra, this is, in other words, for the inquiry to begin into Brahma Vidya, into reconciling those 4, you have to undo certain distortions that are going on in your mind, those pratibhasika distortions. In other words, I have to become a more subtle, discerning human being, see the subtleties of reality. Until that, right, my mind's going to operate on a grosser level. It's only going to say, I'm hungry, no, yes, I like, I don't like, all of these basic statements. So it has to become much, much more subtle in order to capture jiva, jagat, Ishvara, and Brahman. And how is this teaching given? Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. In other words, through a dialogue, Samvada is a dialogue between Shri Krishna and Arjuna. And what kind of a dialogue is this? Well, there are 4 types of communications. The first is Jalpa. Jalpa is basically chit-chat, right? So you're basically kind of passing time, you're having a good time. But at the end of the discussion, you say, what really took place? And you say, I don't remember. We just had a good time, right? So these are good things that can be there for your emotional well-being. But you also have to ask yourself, how much of this jalpa do I want? Do I just want to have a good time, good time, good time, good time? Or am I looking for something else? And then the second one is vitanda. Vitanda is where both parties are speaking, but they're referring back to their own notions. So I'm speaking to you, but I'm always coming back to my own notions. And then when you reply, you respond and you come back to your own notions. So all we're doing is exchanging notions. We're not really, right, looking at our notions. We're just kind of delivering our notions into one big bubble. Now, there is also Vada. What is Vada? Vada is where the communication between 2 parties enhances both of you in some way or the other. Even if it's uncomfortable, it's still Vada, because you have to dig deep into something that is unaddressed, and you come to that point, and then you go, wow, I didn't know I had this burden that's holding me back. I didn't know I had this distortion that's causing me to look at the world in a judgmental manner, and yet on the surface, I'm saying all that is here is one. Think about it. All that is here is one, and yet I look at a politician and I can't include him in that oneness, or I can't include myself in that oneness. This is why we need to look at our distortions, because you can't reconcile one reality if you're excluding anything outside it. And then there is Samvada. Samvada, which is a discussion between Krishna and Arjuna. This is whereby one of them is a master at a particular topic. They specialize at that topic. And then the student comes to the specialist, and the specialist is able to reveal realities that are previously unknown or distorted in the mind of the student. So the specialist corrects all of those distortions so that the student can see reality as the scriptures are intending you to see, which is the vision of oneness. So in this case, Krishna is the Samvada and Arjuna is the Samvada discussion. It is a discussion where Krishna is the expert and we are not fixing Arjuna's problems, but rather we are enlightening our own outlook of life in the light of what Arjuna is receiving. So Arjuna is receiving knowledge from Krishna and we are benefiting from that knowledge. We're not trying to fix Arjuna here. We're trying to look at our own distortions and align our realities with the final reality. And finally, what is the topic of chapter 1? Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama. In other words, the name of chapter 1, when it says yoga, every chapter has yoga at the end. It doesn't mean yoga in the traditional sense. It just means chapter or topic. So what's the name of the yoga? What's the name of the topic? It is Arjuna Vishada. In other words, it is Arjuna breaking down. And finally, the question is this: why have we gone through chapter 1 and not just delved into chapter 2? Would someone like to answer this?
To get a context.
Context, excellent. Anything else you'd like to expand upon that?
It shows the limitations with the Karmakanda, like the different tug of war we have going on inside ourselves.
Good, good. Okay, I like that. So I'll go with that. So it shows us our struggles. It shows us our relative limitations. We are relating to a being who is helpless. We are seeing the shortcomings of humanity, and no one is magically excluded from this. So we are first building a context. As Arsha says, we are relating to a person called Arjuna, and we are putting ourselves in his shoes and letting ourselves be helped by what Krishna will do for Arjuna. So in this way, I want finally to ask you one question and think about, what do you think about Arjuna so far? This is your homework. What do you think about Arjuna so far? And where do you particularly relate with him? Purnamadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnam eva avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.